Are you ambitious for a career at the forefront of business and technology, with the opportunity to shape your own future and contribute to society? Find out about early careers at Capgemini in this episode of Future You. Hello and welcome to Future You, the podcast from graduate careers experts Prospects. We're here to help you achieve your career goals. My name's Dan Mason, and in this episode we're going to hear from 4 graduates who have started their early careers in tech consultancy at Capgemini and Capgemini Invent. They're going to talk about the application process, the skills they learned in the first 90 days on the job, the culture of the organisation, and advice for you if you're thinking of applying. And yes, before you ask, we are also going to find out the difference between the Capgemini and Capgemini Invent graduate schemes. You can subscribe to Future You in your podcast app and head to prospects.ac.uk to search for graduate jobs, including at Capgemini. But let's get straight to it. There's a lot to get through, so here are Fionn, Ruhi, Sophia and Zainab to tell you all about it.
Hi, my name's Fionn, I'm a business analyst and I work for Capgemini.
Hi, I'm Ruhi, I'm a consultant at Capgemini Invent.
Hi everyone, my name's Sophia and I'm an associate consultant at Capgemini Invent.
Hello everyone, my name is Zainab and I am a DevOps engineer at Capgemini.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us, all of you. Perhaps the thing that everyone will have noticed there as you introduced yourselves is that 2 of you said you were from Capgemini, 2 of you said you were from Capgemini Invent. Could you talk a little bit, perhaps one of you from each, about what the differences are between Capgemini and Capgemini Invent when it comes to early careers?
I guess I can go first and share my Capgemini Invent experience.
Perfect.
Before I start, just bear in mind that I did join Capgemini Invent nearly 2 years ago, so the first few months
I think that still counts as early careers.
Yeah, the first few months of my journey now just seem like a distant memory, but the main sort of thing in terms of like Capgemini Invent is that we have this Accelerate program, which is a 21-month program, and during that we have a bit of like an institute for the first 3 months where it's really good for someone that's coming straight from uni, because when I joined I was straight from uni, and the institute was basically that safe space where I could learn a bit more about consulting, a bit more about some of the corporate language as well, without sort of feeling like, oh, people are going to judge me, or if I make a mistake it's going to sort of stay on my record forever. And it was sort of a learning experience because you get to meet other people in your cohort as well, and you sort of have that time where you're working with others, you're learning, and at the same time you're learning a bit more about the company as well, because you get to meet members that are outside of your team, because you work with them on like internal projects or bids or stuff. So you get to build your network whilst being in a safe space. And then, you know, you sort of then, after you've graduated from the institute, you move into the academy, which is where you are then sort of looked after a bit more by your specific business area. But with all of that, you know, you still have the constant support from the graduate community. You still have your cohort that you could reach out to. And during the whole graduate program, L&D is a big part. So, you know, you're able to explore different areas. You're able to do different courses and trainings. And that for me was something that's really stood out as well. During my grad journey.
That's great. Thanks very much for that. Does one of you, perhaps Fionn or Zainab, want to come in from the Capgemini side?
Yeah, so I can share my experience from the Capgemini side. I would probably say, so in the first few months of joining Capgemini, we initially have the onboarding in the first week. It's quite high intensive, a really good introduction into consulting, how to communicate with stakeholders. And then as a business analyst, I think it's quite specific to being a BA. I had a 2-month academy where it was a mixture between shadowing and online learning, self-learning, and some also external courses that we did with some external companies during those 2 months in the academy. That was really the foundation to my start at Capgemini. It gave me a really good chance to meet new people in the BA space specifically, and learn lots of skills to do with business analysis, and also understand the structure of Capgemini that I'd be working with. On from those 2 months, I would say that you are integrated into the business quite fluidly. The difference with being a graduate is that you have an additional support network of the graduate community, who is a group of people, all graduates, led by a senior member of staff, who then gives you additional support and opportunities throughout your time as a graduate. And that adds as an additional support and encouragement to progress your career quite rapidly. But apart from the graduate community, you are integrated quite nicely into the company. You get given quite a lot of responsibility, and it's quite nice because you don't feel like you're underqualified or you don't know what's going on. You've got that additional support if you need it, but essentially you are a Capgemini employee working the same as everybody else, and you really make a contribution to the work that we do with our clients.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's a really good introduction. Is there anything anyone wants to add to the sort of introductory piece there?
I think what I would like to add just on your question there at the beginning, kind of like the difference, I
Sure.
would say from what I've noticed is that Capgemini Invent kind of deals with a lot more new, inclusive, interactive technology that also I think the whole idea behind Capgemini Invent from Capgemini was so they could bring in more smaller companies. So, for example, Capgemini might deal a lot with bigger company or a lot other more established company, but I think with Invent, you can bring in a smaller company with more interactive technology. But it's kind of basically a more consultancy side of Capgemini. I think for graduates that are looking into coming in, just looking at like the different type of roles so you can get between Capgemini Invent and Capgemini, even though we're all kind of like a big company, one, there is slightly a difference and different prospects of work that you do. And I know that, for example, Capgemini Invent, they're doing a lot with the future of shopping and interactive shopping. They have done a pop-up stand in central London, which is quite cool, where you can kind of go in and shop it in an interactive way with technology. So that's a lot of the things that they do with their Capgemini Invent.
Okay, I think that gives us a great background. Let's step back a little bit and talk about the application process that you all went through. Who wants to give us maybe a standout moment from that application process? It could be maybe it's a particularly stressful or challenging moment, or a moment where you really thought this was the right job for you. Who wants to come in on that?
I can go first. So initially I was quite interested in applying to Capgemini Invent, as I knew one of the colleagues who currently work here and they couldn't recommend it highly enough. But one of the standout moments for me was actually attending a virtual, in those days, Insight event. And what I found really interesting was there was a mixture of senior leadership as well as grads presenting and sharing about their journeys and internal networks within Capgemini Invent as well. And what I took away from that Insight event was not obviously like a really interesting journey ahead of me, but it was full cycle. It didn't just include the work, but also some of the inclusion network, some of the things that current grads had set up. And for me, that kind of stood out to me. Rather than persuading me on the role, it kind of persuaded me on the company as a whole. So that was one thing that really stood out to me.
Interesting. Yeah. Anyone else got a particular moment they want to talk about?
For me as well, it was that virtual assessment centre. I was applying for Capgemini, and mine was also virtual, and we had about 6 people in our assessment centre. It was really organised and run really well, but what stood out to me was the variety of activities that we were asked to do. It really helped me showcase my understanding and ability in lots of different ways, and it wasn't all about what you knew. Capgemini aren't really looking for what you know in that moment. It's more about how you apply your skills that you already have and how eager you are to develop those skills and develop new skills. And I think you were really given the opportunity to show that during the activities in the assessment centre. And again, I saw graduates, I saw people that manage me now. It wasn't people, sometimes you see in interviews or assessment centres, people high up in the company or people from HR, and you never see them ever again. But the people that interviewed me in my assessment centre, I interact with them regularly. I still have contact with a lot of them. And that was something that was really nice to see, that continuity from the really early stages of recruitment right into, everyday working life.
So it was very much about identifying potential rather than sort of testing you on current knowledge, as you say.
Exactly. Capgemini have values, and it's probably one of the most important things in everyday working life. If you have those values, if you show an eagerness to learn, to develop, to contribute to what Capgemini are trying to achieve with their clients, and also for the community. That's something that they really value. And that's what they were looking for, really, throughout that recruitment process. So, yeah, it's not all about your ability at the time. Because at the end of the day, we're straight out of university. We're still young. We've still got a lot of learning potential. And it's potential mixed with your eagerness and willingness to learn, that's what Capgemini look for, and that's what they really value.
Fantastic. And sticking with the application process, what did you guys learn through that process? Were there things that maybe surprised you, or things that you weren't expecting, or that you developed an understanding through the application process itself?
I think for me, one of the things that surprised me in a way was how calm the whole thing was. Like the interview, the group activity that we had during the assessment centre. Obviously everyone was sort of nervous and stuff, but the assessors, the way they sort of tried to keep us calm, the way they sort of, had conversations with us during the interview, where it was they weren't constantly making notes. We could see them looking at us and talking to us, and were sort of interested in us as people rather than us as what value or how are we going to, increase the business in a way.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on the application process before we move on?
Yeah, I think for me, something that I found really interesting was the feedback that we receive every stage. And I think not only did it prelude to the importance of feedback at Capgemini, both I think as part of your grad journey, but also wider. I think there's so many times where, for example, I've been through application processes and it's just I'm talking out to a void, I don't know if there's anyone behind and actually screening. But at every stage there was feedback on how I performed, and I really appreciated that, especially at the assessment centre, hearing the things that I did well and the things that I could improve on in the future.
Yeah, that feedback's so important, isn't it? And so often lacking from grad job applications as well.
I think I would also like to add, like, I've come from a legal background, so I did law at uni. So I think it was definitely, I think I taught as well, like doing an assessment center for a tech consultancy company was going to be like on another level, like difficult, because they're going to ask me all the technical questions and they're going to expect me to learn 10 different languages and have done X amount of projects. So I was just like kind of over my head, like, what am I doing? I've just done law and now I want to work in a tech consultancy. But I would say, like some of my teammates have already mentioned, it was so collaborative and it's about your potential and kind of like what are your interests and where can you be? Like they're not here to kind of take experienced workers because they could just hire for experienced. But they kind of wanted to listen to you and hear your stories and hear what you've done. Like in my assessment center, I spoke about how I worked as a receptionist at a nursery. So it was definitely more very collaborative and they could really see the potential. So I would say definitely one other thing that stood out to me was how interactive it was and how they're really trying to learn about you and really trying to like get the best out of you.
And it's also a two-way conversation. It's not just about, what Capgemini can get out of their employees and, it's more about, are you a right fit? Is Capgemini going to offer you as a graduate what you want for your career? And that's something that I really, that really surprised me. And that's really why I joined, because I obviously so early on in your career, you do want to progress and you do want to, see a future for yourself, and it's not just about what you can offer Capgemini, it's also what Capgemini offers you, and does that fit with what you want for your future as well, and that's really nice.
It sounds like a really positive process, and of course it was positive for all of you because it was a successful application. So let's move on now to those first 90 days. You've started in the job. Can you identify any skills that you particularly learn in those first 90 days?
Yeah, like I said, there was a business analyst academy for all of the BAs that joined in my cohort. In the first week of joining, we did a internal course called Collaborating with Clients. It's notoriously known as quite a high intensive course. I think it's 3 days long, and you spend the full 3 days working with all of the cohort that over the whole of Capgemini, not just your market unit. And you basically replicate kind of what a client presentation would be like over 3 days. So you try and gather requirements, you try and implement some sort of solution, and then you try and price it up to meet their needs and things like that, and then you present it back to we did it to some people over in France, I think, internal Capgemini employees over in France. And it was really fun. It was a really fun 3 days, but it was really intense, especially because I'd never really been in, that consulting environment before. So that was a steep learning curve. And actually, that's something that you can do multiple times in your career at Capgemini. It's not something that you just do in the first 3 days. So maybe in a couple of years, when I've got a little bit more experience, I'll go back to that internal course and hopefully bring some new things to the table. But yeah, so that was the first 3 days, really quite high intensive. And then I went on then to do 2 months of Business Analyst Academy. So I did courses such as high impact communication. That was an external course where I learned how to present and speak in front of people. I also did some online courses to do with more techie things like the cloud, AWS, some iterative integration, all about agile and business analyst techniques. And then also I started a diploma. So that's a foundation business analyst diploma that I've still got just one module to do left now. I started it in my academy 18 months ago, and then I'll just do this one exam and then I'll have completed that. So it gets you on the road to completing more qualifications. So yeah, it was my first 90 days were very, very intense on the learning side of things. But it's really quite good because it gives you a safe space to get things wrong. You also do a lot of networking. I met so many people, again, that I still keep in touch with now. I was also given a buddy, which was a graduate that started, I think 6 months before me. And again, I still speak to her now. We're really quite good friends. We've met outside of work. And that's somebody that you can go to ask all your really silly questions, you know, like, or if you're feeling down one day and you want somebody friendly to speak to. So they have that buddy initiative where you get given a graduate when you first join. And if there's things that's not particularly work related or you don't know who to ask, go to your buddy and then they can guide you in the right direction. So yeah, steep learning curve in the first 90 days, but it sets you up nicely for the rest of your time.
Brilliant. It certainly sounds intense. Is that everyone else's experience as well?
So at Capgemini Invent, it is a little bit different. So we, as graduates, when we join, we have 3 weeks of induction, and those induction sessions are quite collaborative. You're working with members with your own cohort, preparing presentations and case studies, but there's also lots of learning to do. So you learn a lot about the business in itself and different roles that are available after induction. And then after induction, there's a three month kind of there's no other way to say it but safe space. It's called the Institute, and what you do is you come in and you're given internal assignments that kind of mimic the skills that you would need for client delivery and being like in a billable role, but it's within that safe space. So you're getting lots and lots of feedback. So for example, people, other members of the business will come and submit assignments, and as an institutee, your role is to figure out the requirements and deliver that work to them in the form of a presentation. And every stage of that, you do get feedback, both from your client, quote unquote, but also from your institute coach who works alongside you. And so by the end of the 3 months, because you've kind of delivered a number of institute assignments, when it gets to being put in front of a client, you've practiced those skills in a safe space. You've got the feedback, you've got the areas of improvement that you've worked on, and so it doesn't seem as daunting. So that is a bit of a difference compared to what Fiona just said.
I think that's a really good overview. Before we move on, does anyone want to add anything else to that sort of first 90 days experience?
I think just to add to what Sophia was saying, in terms of, you know, the clients that you work with during the institute. So you work with people across Capgemini Invent. So, you know, it's not just people that are specifically in like the business area that you'll be going into. So I've worked with people from across, you know, business technology and intelligent. Well, I forgot the name. II now. But so you sort of like work with people across Invent, and with the institute sort of just having new cohorts and grads. Everyone's sort of waiting for graduates to come in for like ideas and a fresh pair of eyes with things. So, you know, you get to work on some really cool projects as part of the institute as well, that sometimes you kind of wouldn't know of if you weren't in the institute. So yeah. Okay,
let's broaden it out now to talk about the wider culture of the organisation, because this is something that we know new graduates are more and more interested in hearing about before they apply to jobs. What would any of you identify as the key words or your top words that would describe the culture at Capgemini?
I think 3 words that I would use would be welcoming, inclusive and fun. And I think with fun, I remember reading before I applied that fun is a value. And I was just thinking that's probably the only place that I've heard describing themselves as being fun.
Yeah.
But I can confirm it is the case, and it as rewarding as it is to work here, it is fun, and you get to interact with lots of different people, lots of different personality types, and it's been a lovely experience so far.
Could you just expand a bit more on that, actually, on the word fun? What do you mean by that? Is it sort of organised fun in the sense that there's lots of, organised social things alongside your work, or is it that the work itself is made fun, or what do you mean?
So I think there are so many different opportunities for social. So you are given that option. There are company-wide ones, there's ones within your team. And there is always the importance of ensuring that they are inclusive as well. And I think also, from like speaking of some of my previous experiences, some of the work that I've actually done has been quite fun as well. And I think also it's not the nature of the work, but also the teammates that I have. Everyone brings in their own perspective into work, and sometimes when we're thinking about new ideas of work that we can deliver, there isn't later, obviously we do assess it for feasibility, but at the beginning, we're encouraged to come up with these wacky ideas that are quite fun to come up with, to be honest. But there's also initiatives at Capgemini Invent, such as the Personal Enrichment Fund, and what that is around like 250, I believe, where you are encouraged to like personally enrich yourself and develop your skills. And a lot of the times people have come up with quite interesting ways to use that. So for example, I've heard of someone doing like a stand-up class, and then they delivered stand-up comedy in front of their colleagues. So so I think you are encouraged to bring your entire self to work, and that is one of the best ways, and I think that it makes it fun.
Fantastic. Anyone else got any other words to throw in there?
I'd probably say diverse and supportive. So sort of coming in, you the first step, like in the cohort as well, you meet people with different backgrounds, with different experience, and then that just sort of makes you feel very welcomed in itself as well, like Sophia said, and then supportive because, it's all about growth, it's all about L&D, it's all about your personal development whilst you're on the grad scheme and also after that as well, and you're able to sort of not only grow in terms of work, but also things that you want to, do outside as well. Like Sophia mentioned about the Personal Enrichment Fund. So all of that sort of comes into the supportive category for me. And yeah, I'd sort of describe it as diverse and supportive, as well as all the other words that Sophia has mentioned.
Yeah. Okay, well, so that's the culture of the organisation. Another thing that new graduates in their early careers are exposed to joining a big organisation like this can be some of the corporate language, the corporate buzzwords that get thrown around. Have you guys got any favourites of those of the jargon that maybe people outside the business might not understand or that kind of thing?
Two of my favourite ones are SPOC, which is Special Point of Contact, and another one is POAP, which is Plan on a Page. And I just like POAP because it kind of sounds like a sound effect, to be honest.
I think for me, was probably like just basic ones like AL, and I was just like, whoa, what's AL like? Or just seeing someone go, oh, I'm going to be triple O. I'm like, oh, sorry, what? It took me a while to understand they meant like annual leave or out of office. And now that I use it, often I have like friends that also ask me, wait, what do you mean? So, yeah.
Yeah, these kind of office-based acronyms that you sort of assume people know.
Definitely.
Brilliant. Okay, let's talk now about something that you've actually touched on earlier. When we were talking about the culture, it was, I think, inclusive and diverse were mentioned as some of those words. Tell me a bit about the inclusion networks at Capgemini and what they involve.
Like I said before, we have a graduate community that I get involved with quite a lot and quite enjoy chatting with people in the graduate community. I'm also aware of Women at Capgemini. There's a network for women, and they do, and there's also there's an LGBTQ one, definitely. And then we have ones round your professions as well. So we've got a business analyst community, there's also engagement management community and things like that. And these groups of people, they have talks and they do events and things like that that aren't just for women at Capgemini, for example. They hold talks to bring awareness to women in tech and the positive impacts that women in tech could have. And it's not just for women at Capgemini. Anybody is invited. Anybody can come along to learn about women in tech or underrepresented people in the business. There was also an initiative at Capgemini not that long ago, actually, to encourage new mothers who had been out of work for 2 years or more to get back into their careers, join Capgemini and come back into the business. So Capgemini really do try to recognise everybody that works for them and try to support them in any way that they can, whether that's through creating groups with volunteers to support or to push initiatives themselves. There's loads more, but they're the only ones that I'm really too aware of.
Yeah, I can jump in here. So
Sure.
some of the networks that Fiona mentioned are Capgemini wide. So like the Women at Capgemini, the Race and Equality Network, Outfront as well. Those are all Capgemini level inclusion networks, and so anyone can join and it's open to members from Invent. And one of the things that I've actually found to be quite welcoming and inclusive about Capgemini is if you, for example, there is a network, you feel the need for a network that represents you, you're very, very welcome to set that up and get it running, and there's always support from every level. So for example, recently, within the last 6-ish months, there's been a new network launched called Black Women at Capgemini. And so they have been organising events and just making it so that there's a safe space for Black women to talk about their careers, but themselves and some issues that we face as well. And also there are other inclusion networks such as Capability, which is to do is for disability and carers. And so one of the really cool initiatives that they ran before when I joined is something called reverse mentoring. And so you're paired up with someone who is more senior in the business, but they're the mentee and you're the mentor on disability. So that was really interesting and something unique that I thought Capgemini does. But yeah, again, even if, for example, there is, you want to set up a new network, that's absolutely fine. And there have been quite a few actually in the past couple of months.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on that as well. Like everyone said, there are quite a few, and whichever one you kind of best suit in, you can join. And as you mentioned, the Black women at Capgemini, they are currently doing a kind of like a meeting. So we meet each other and you kind of go through like so like you meet one person and you talk about them and you share out, and then that person writes a little bit about the next person, so that way you kind of get to meet everyone. So they actually do events as well, and we host events in the office as well, so everyone gets to meet. And there's also a Muslims at Capgemini as well, and we actually just celebrated the 1st of Feb for the World Hijab Day. So there's definitely quite a few, and I think it's just like whichever one you feel most comfortable with, or like you can just join as many as you want. Like I've joined loads, and just to see kind of like what's going on around Capgemini.
Fantastic. Let's move on. I want to talk finally thinking about potential new applicants who might be listening to this and think that they having heard all of the positive things you've had to say about Capgemini and Capgemini Invent, what advice do you have for someone who is thinking of doing that, of applying? What would be your key tips, shall we say?
So for anybody wanting to join Capgemini, well, for either Capgemini or Capgemini Invent, I would say number one, look at Capgemini's values. 100%, every single employee lives their day-to-day by these values, whether that's outwardly or underlying. It doesn't have to be expressed every single day. We've got great team spirit, but everything that we do is our values are incorporated in them. So really learn those. The second thing I would say is identify what you want. Write down a list of everything that you want from your career, where you want to be, how you want to get there. And be open to some sort of change on that or adaptation, but write down what you want and see if what Capgemini offers can fulfill that. The third thing I would say is don't worry about your capabilities now. Always be open to learn new things. Nobody knows everything, and ask questions, talk to people. We work as a team at Capgemini. It's not about what one person can do. It's about what we can deliver as a company, as a team, to our client. So always be willing to grow and adapt and learn. Don't really worry about what capabilities you've got now, but just think of your potential and where you want to go.
I think one thing that I would like to add, I know I've mentioned it before as well, I didn't come from a tech background. I didn't do a STEM degree. I didn't do anything kind of like, I just didn't used to like STEM subjects a lot. And I would say I kind of came to the tech space a bit later. But there was always a little of an interest in me in tech and just new tech gadgets. And I'll be interested in what's new in the market, what they do now. So I think don't be afraid to apply. You're not really gonna lose anything if you apply, and even if you get rejected, you haven't lost anything. You might have some time might have gone by, but you've learned from there. You've learned from this application, and now you can, use it elsewhere in another application again. So don't be afraid. I do speak to a lot of people that are interested in tech or are moving from another field to another, and they think, oh, I don't know X amount of coding languages, or I don't have experience. I would say try or do your research, have a look at the company, and still go for it. They are not looking for years of experience, especially if you're applying for a graduate role or even an apprenticeship role that you can even apply for. So I would say definitely try, give it a go. As long as you have that interest in tech in you, then you'll definitely be able to see a potential and a potential in you to kind of manifest and grow and build you. So yeah, I would definitely say don't be afraid to still apply, have a look into it, and yeah, go for it.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it, to say that about you don't have to have come from the formal tech STEM background.
Yeah, especially it's quite. I think it's just to do with the tech field. Sometimes you think you have to be a genius, especially being maybe a software engineer. I think if you tell people I'm a software engineer, they're like, oh, you need to know maths, or you probably like a genius, etc. But really, a lot of the things I do day to day is just googling and kind of trying to figure out what happens, what's going on there, how do I fix this, and just problem solving really.
I think definitely what Zainab mentioned, just to reiterate, you do not have to be from a STEM background. You don't have to have a computer science degree or anything like that. And I think the more different, actually, the better, because you've got a different way of thinking compared to everyone else, and that's what, and a different way of problem solving. And sometimes, that's what is needed. And I think specifically to applications, don't underestimate the value of giving examples in your application. Even if you might not think, for example, oh, I don't have that relevant experience, draw from your experience, working in retail, or if you've volunteered or anything like that, because I'm certain there are transferable skills that you can put in your application. And it just goes to show that you have a history of demonstrating those skills, and you just need to now apply them in a different context. And I think definitely also reach out to people online who on LinkedIn, for example, who have the role that you're applying for. If you have any specific questions about their experience, or if you're on the fence and you just want to hear more, reach out. Definitely that's something that I do not regret doing when I was applying. And you just hear firstly, it's just a way to actually understand about the company and about the role from someone who's living it day to day. But you also can ask questions that you might not feel comfortable asking, for example, in front of everyone in an assessment centre. So I would say definitely reach out to people on LinkedIn. And I think definitely do your research as well. So like we mentioned earlier today, there are differences between Capgemini and Capgemini Invent, and knowing which graduate scheme you're applying to. Just make sure you know the differences, because that is something that you will be asked. And yeah, I think that's it from me.
I think just one thing that I'd like to add on everything else that everyone has said is we also, I know Capgemini and Invent, we did insight days as well. So, those are really good for people to sort of understand the support that we provide in the graduate program, what sort of work that we do. You get to hear a bit around people's experience as well. And then we've also started doing the hybrid one, so you can sort of come into the office as well. So one, you get to see the place, you get to also meet some of the grads in person, you get to meet some of the leadership team as well, and that interaction as well can give you a bit of an idea of, one, if you want to apply. Two, if you have any questions, you can just ask them there and then, and you can start building your network there as well, even before you are in the company. So then when you do start, you already know a few people that you could reach out to. So I think that is also one way that you could approach this, which is Insight Days, because they do help graduates understand what the Accelerate program is. And what Capgemini Invent is as well. So definitely have a look at those.
Excellent, and that's loads of great advice for new graduates, potential applicants. We'll leave it there. I just want to finish by saying thank you all so much for your time today.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to all my guests on this episode, Fionn, Ruhi, Sophia and Zainab. As I said earlier, you can search for graduate jobs at Capgemini by going to prospects.ac.uk or visit the Capgemini website. To hear more from Future You, find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts, or at prospects.ac.uk/podcasts. You can get in touch with comments, feedback, or suggestions. Just email podcast@prospects.ac.uk. That's it for this episode. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you soon.